I've played over 400 matches with Greninja and I've secured a 70% win rate, all in solo queue. And yes, I have no friends. But in today's video, I will be sharing how I managed to survive solo queue and keep up such a high win rate with Greninja, one of the best attackers in the game. Now I know 400 matches isn't as impressive as other people with 15,000. How do you even get that many? But I've been playing Greninja since day one of the game, so I have experience with them. And I don't want to pat my own back, but 70% in solo queue is pretty impressive. So let's start with the basics.
Greninja!
Greninja is a ranged attacker in Pokemon Unite, and at range, Greninja's auto attacks reduce the cooldown of Surf, Water, Shuriken, and Bubble by 0.5 seconds. And boosted attacks reduce enemy movement speed by 25% for 0.5 seconds. In Melee, Greninja's auto attacks instead deal bonus damage equal to 5% missing HP, and boosted attacks also dash through the primary target and increase the missing HP damage to 10%. Greninja is very squishy, so if you don't play him right, then you can end up costing most matches. And for anyone who plays Greninja, then you know it only takes one ability from an enemy to eliminate you. But why is Greninja so squishy? That's because he was designed this way. So Greninja's passive Turret states that while HP is 50% or less, then attack is increased by 5% and movement speed is increased by 12%, meaning that this Pokemon is very likely to be below 50% health throughout majority of the match. But it gets advantages from that. A lot of players underestimate Greninja's ability to clutch a 1v1 or a team fight. They see low HP Greninja running away and they think it's a free kill. But as a Greninja main, I can tell you you're walking right into a trap. Not only does Greninja have a passive that boosts damage, but his moves and even basic attack grant him HP as well. So that low HP Greninja you're chasing won't be low for long. Let's talk about Greninja's moves. Greninja starts with two moves, Bubbles and Substitute. Bubbles launches two bubbles which pop when they hit enemies, slowing them and dealing damage. Bubbles is a very strong early game move, so don't underestimate the damage. A lot of enemies see a Froakie and think they can push all the way up to your goal, but I promise Bubbles will humble them. Substitute basically leaves a dummy, which is helpful as well because it gives you a free dash to escape enemies. So don't be afraid to go score some and then use your Substitute to dash away. Now once level 7 you can upgrade Bubbles to either Water Shuriken or Surf. With Water Shuriken, Greninja throws 4 Shuriken that slows enemies for 1 second on impact. The move also grants 25% movement speed. At level 11 you throw 5 instead. And this move also heals Greninja, which is why I said chasing low HP Greninja might be a bad idea. Water Shuriken is one of Greninja's safest moves because you don't have to get too close to enemies and can just poke damage. Depending on the matchup, you might want to consider Surf if there are a lot of squishies on the team. And Surf is the second move upgrade choice. With Surf, Greninja dashes on a wave damaging enemies and healing himself. Enemies below half health are dealt bonus damage, and if they are KO'd, then a move resets. This is one of Greninja's best moves because you can finish off low enemies in a string of combos. My favorite thing to do is to use wild Pokemon to reset the move and combo enemies. Surfing into a low HP wild Pokemon resets the move. You can deal so much damage abusing this. Now, a lot of Pokemon are tanky, and sometimes you might be a couple HP off from finishing them off, and this can be bad because you end up messing up your Surf reset, and sometimes you end up dying. So keep an eye on your HP and utilize your boosted attack. You should try to get an enemy as low as possible, and if they still have more than 50% HP, try throwing 2 range attacks into Surf and then use your boosted melee attack. Greninja does more damage with melee, so don't be afraid to get up close and personal. Moving on to Substitute's move upgrades, you can choose between Double Team or Smoke Screen. Whichever move you want to pick depends on your playstyle. Double Team makes Greninja vanish, sending clones in different directions, and the clones deal 18% of Greninja's damage and look exactly like your Pokemon. This is good for baiting enemies into wasting a move on your clone and then going in for the attack. I personally like to use Water Shuriken with this move because the clones can deal a decent amount of damage with them, but I know most people like to use Smoke Screen. Smoke Screen makes Greninja invisible for 3 seconds and leaves enemies blind in the smoke. Greninja's next attack is boosted and deals increased damage. This move goes really well with Surf, but you can also sneak into the enemy's backline and kill low HP Pokemon who are hanging out there. Moving on to the last move of Greninja, his Unite move, Water Burst Shuriken. Greninja throws a giant Shuriken in a designated area, dealing damage, and enemies damaged by this move have their movement speed reduced. Water Burst Shuriken grants Greninja 30% movement speed, 35% attack damage, and 20% of his max HP and a shield. This ultimate is very high burst, and you can use it to get enemies low and then finish them with Surf. It is possible to clean up a team fight with this ultimate and Surf. Just make sure to wait for the right moment to get the most value out of it, and sometimes it's even worth to use it on a single Pokemon. Now that we covered Greninja's basics, let's talk about the best builds to use with him. Right now I'm using Attack Weight, Muscle Band, and Rapid Fire Scarf, and that's because Rapid Fire Scarf feels necessary because it grants Greninja more attack speed and attack. After 3 basic attacks, the Scarf increases your attack speed by 30%, which makes Greninja very fast in team fights. The same goes for Muscle Band, it grants you attack speed and attack, and of course with Attack Weight you get stacks on your attack, which makes the most value out of using your attack speed because you are going to have a high stacks on your attack. You could probably swap Scarf with Scope Lens or Razor Claw, but then you'll be missing out on increased basic attack speed. Try both and see which one works best for you. Now when it comes to Pokemon emblems, you want to focus on stacks Brown and Red. Brown grants attack boost and Red grants attack speed. Right now I have 6 brown, 3 red, 2 purple, 1 pink, and 1 gray, and that's because I don't have a lot of Pokemon emblems, but I'm hoping to get more red soon so I can boost up his attack speed. That pretty much covers the basics and builds of Greninja, and now here are some tips to level up your gameplay to pro. Disclaimer, this is a preferred playstyle, and so it might not work for you, but it works for me. These are tips that help me to get to a 70% win rate with Greninja and to survive in solo queue, and like I said, it might not work for you, but it works for me. The first tip is to lane with Greninja and leave the jungle for speedsters or stronger all-rounder Pokemon. I feel jungling should be left to much stronger Pokemon like Mewtwo, Urshifu, Scizor, or Zeraora. Other Pokemon that are just more tanky and have a better advantage when ganking. The last thing you want to do when ganking is to arrive in a lane, take a couple hits, and then have to retreat. That's a waste of an opportunity. Since Greninja is so squishy, this is what happens majority of the time. And because he arrives in a lane usually at level 5, you're not going to have your Surf or Water Shurikens. So me personally, I like the lane and leave the ganking and jungling to stronger Pokemon. The second tip is if you're using attack weight in your build, which you should, then make sure you try to score after collecting points from your lane farm. Be aggressive and steal wild Pokemon from the enemies, but be aware of your health and where the enemy jungle is at. Next tip is to farm as much as you can. Greninja has a lot of his attack speed, so you can use this to clean farms. If your map has a lot of wild Pokemon in it, then you're already playing Greninja wrong. This goes for any Pokemon really. You should always make sure to clean up your jungle and farm. This makes it so you have a level advantage, and so enemies can't steal your XP. Most matches you should be level 14 or even 15 by the time Rayquaza shows up. The last tip I want to share is to go for backline squishies when you ult. Don't waste your Unite move on a shielded tank, unless they are grouped up with other enemies. Sometimes it's worth getting a Gardevoir or Decidueye